All right. Well, folks, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Thomas. Thomas and I met very recently in Vancouver, and it was lots of fun conversations and fun evenings together. And it's such a pleasure to have Thomas. Thomas is the CEO of GitHub. Everybody knows GitHub. GitHub is saving the world with open source, and of course, transforming the world with AI. So without further ado, Thomas, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry that I couldn't be in New York today. It's been a lot of travel in recent week. And I had that we're doing Q&A, but I can also just walk through the questions that were pre-submitted. Is that how you want me to do it?
No, so I think, Thomas, because this is not fireside, maybe it's easier if you just kind of do it on your own, because it'd be harder to kind of do the back and forth play here. Okay,
that's totally cool. So maybe, for those that haven't heard about GitHub or only have heard about GitHub in the context of open source, we think of GitHub as the home of coding. It's where all the world's developers collaborate together to build software. And, it's kind of like the center of nerditude, the social network for software developers. And today, GitHub is not only about open source code, it's also about all enterprises building their software, because many of our customers, small startups or large enterprises, want to have the same collaboration model as open source, right? They want no boundaries, they want no friction or low friction. They want developers to collaborate as fast as possible to ship more value. And I'm sure you have heard about this thing, AI, that has been in everybody's mind for the last year and a half. We started working on our first AI product, GitHub Copilot, back in 2020. When we got access to the GPT-3 model, we built this novel AI developer tool. We call it an AI pair programmer back in 2020 and shipped it in June 2021. And it helps developers during their process, right? It helps them writing code. It helps them explaining code, understanding existing code bases. I'm sure you all have some form of code in your company, and every time a team member comes in or switches jobs or switches between teams, they have to understand all the work that the previous team has been doing. And today, Copilot, GitHub Copilot is the most widely adopted AI developer tool in the world. Over 50,000 organizations are using it, and Microsoft just recently announced in our earnings call that we have now 1.8 million paid subscribers on Copilot. But I think what's more interesting here is that we found product market fit, not because we were betting it all on AI, but because we made developers more happy, more fulfilled, while making them also more productive. Case studies show that Copilot makes developers up to 55% faster. And so it helps developers to do more of what they want and less of the things that they don't want to do, right? It takes away what we call boilerplate. It takes away the dishwashing. It replaces a lot of these dishwasher tasks, with an automatic dishwasher. And I talked about this recently at TED in Vancouver. As Ed mentioned, we met there for the last 50 or more years. If you wanted to build software, you had to understand all the abstraction layers of the machine. When I was a kid, my mom still had punch cards in her office, and as I got a Commodore 64, I had to understand all the intricacies of the CPU and the memory and the caches and the tape drive, and then later disk drives, right? And famously, Bill Gates said that nobody needs more than 640K of RAM. And so, and then we moved into higher languages, and today everybody is composing software like they're stacking Lego blocks, and they're using open source libraries and lots of existing systems. But the problem remains, you have to understand a lot of these abstraction layers. And with AI, now we brought human language, natural language into this equation. For the first time, all you need to build a little script or a little piece of software is the language that your parents taught you. And it doesn't have to be English. It can be, German or Brazilian, Portuguese, Hindi, all the languages that kids learn first are supported by Copilot. And so we think, this is in many ways the greatest advancement of tech in the last 100 years. You no longer have to be an expert, a professional software developer to build a piece of software. If you have used ChatGPT and ask it a math question, you may have seen that it actually creates a Python script behind the scenes to do the math for you or plot the graph for you. And what we think this will do to the workforce is it will create a much more diverse global workforce, because language is no longer the barrier, access is no longer the barrier, and what also is no longer the barrier is that you have to have somebody else in your organization or in your family, in your house, that already has the technical understanding that you can ask questions. You now have an AI companion available to you that doesn't judge you, that you can ask all the questions that you want, 1,000 of them if you want, every afternoon, and it will help you to explore, a specific topic, whether it's software development, finances, or really anything that the model knows about. And so I really think, the next Microsoft, the next tech company is as likely to come from anywhere in the world, from Mumbai, from Rio, maybe from Cape Town, because programmers can now build with human language. Any person can become a creator with the help of AI. Last year, we published a study that shows that just through AI developer tools, just through GitHub Copilot alone, we think that the global GDP will be boosted by about $1.5 trillion in 2030. Think about that, right? Like just this one simple tool that helps developers writing code will generate an additional $1.5 trillion. And adoption of Copilot is so easy. All your developers need to do is install an extension in the editor, and they get the power of AI right where they're doing their job already. It's not about changing the workflow. It's not about forcing a transformation. I'm sure you have, in the past 10 years heard about the cloud transformation or the digital transformation. That was always a hard story because you had to think about how do I move from my on-prem data center into the cloud, and how do I keep things running. With AI, it's much easier to do this. It's almost like a snip of a finger. Developers and really any professional worker can install these assistants into their workflow. They keep working like they worked before, but now they have the help of AI. Earlier this morning, I was in a Teams meeting with about 50 people, and there were lots of conversations and presentation. At the end, we just had the Teams Copilot summarize the whole conversation and identified the right action items. It even had, names attached to every action item, based off the conversation and what was said in the room. And so it's already remarkable how much easier that can make, something like a meeting or building software. Now, a question we often get is, so I rolled out AI, how can I measure the impact of this new tool? And how can I justify the price that I have to pay for this tool? You have to, either pay a cloud vendor like Microsoft, or you have to install your own GPUs in a data center. So naturally, this comes with a cost side of things. And so CEOs want to see, what do I get out of it? And in software technology, there's two different approaches to this. One is metrics. If you're in software, you may have heard of the DORA metrics, DORA. It's a set of metrics that every software company can measure, like time to remediate an outage, or time between I have an idea and I deploy this to the cloud. But there's also more simple ways like code commits, merge rates, things like that show that Copilot actually makes developers more productive end to end. We have done a study with Accenture last year with about 450 developers that showed just by giving auto-completion, AI-based auto-completion to developers in their editor, developers get more productive in shipping higher quality code into production. They had more builds, they had less time per build, so that means better quality, and an overall higher merge rate of their so-called pull requests. So we see that the value of AI is not just to make the developer more happy in what they're doing. It actually shows an end-to-end improvement in the value chain. The other way of measuring the impact of AI is literally just asking people how they feel about using it. And despite what you might have heard in the news about how scary AI is, if you actually go to software developers that have used Copilot for a while, they no longer want to work without a Copilot. And I think that's true for many of the other Copilots out there. I already mentioned the Teams Copilot. Once you're used to having Teams summarize all your meetings for you, or Word, helping you to summarize a long doc to get a TLDR, as we say, you don't want to move away from this. And even if it's a little bit off base, maybe you don't like the wording, maybe there's a little inaccuracy. Well, it's just text, right? At the end of the day, we can all become copy editors and modify that text to our liking. And, then the question is, why would I not want a Copilot, right? What implication has that on my competitive strategy? Well, I'm sure, that building software 55% faster aligns with everybody's business goals. We live in a world today that is dependent on software. You can't really do anything today without software. I'm sure, on your way to this meeting this morning, you used a lot of software from the moment you're waking up. Maybe your coffee maker is software-based. If you want a recommendation, there's some that you can actually code with open source. Your car was likely software-based with an app, and maybe even the elevator had some software where you picked, the floor you had to get onto, and it showed you have to take elevator D, right? We're living in a world where every organization is becoming a software company, and if you're not, betting on this, you're going to not have a competitive advantage anymore. You're not going to have differentiation. So we believe that a customized AI assistant for any developers, for any employee, not just developers, represents the future. This AI companion that understands the deep institutional knowledge of the organization, that understands the business processes that I'm working in as an employee, and that doesn't judge me, that is always available to me. Because let's face it, I've been in software for 30 years. I've been a CEO for the last 3 years. And yet, if I would join any of your companies, I would still have that anxiety in my head on the first few days. How many questions can I really ask before everybody thinks, man, Thomas is dumb? Why did we hire him? He doesn't know anything, right? No matter whether you just finished NYU or you have been in the industry for 30 years, you will always have a hard time to understanding the institutional knowledge of the organization that you're joining. We are all doing the same thing in different ways. We all have our stack of systems and processes and culture. So having a companion on our side that can help us navigate these organizations, even just help us, Thomas, go to Cole, and he will have the answer. Finding the right person is going to be tremendously helpful. And I think, when you think about AI and risks of AI, I recently saw a fireside chat with the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, who said, if you're not using AI today, you're doing it wrong. And you're not going to lose to AI itself, but you're going to lose to the companies that leverage it already. Those companies are ahead of the curve. Those companies that have embraced this new technology, this age of AI, are on the good side of the productivity polarity. They're going to benefit from all these productivity gains, while those that are waiting are going to be behind, in the same way that companies that didn't embrace the internet fast enough or didn't embrace the cloud fast enough are now behind on the digital transformation. And in fact, we're seeing that, they're struggling then to also roll out AI, because if you don't have all your data, as one example, in the cloud, if you don't have a single data plane across all your company, you will have a really hard time of adopting AI, and whether it's using AI tools like Copilot, or whether it's training your own models or fine-tuning a model. And then, the question I often get is, what about governance, regulation, responsible AI? And we at Microsoft, have been thinking and working on this for the last decade, and we have, made mistakes along the way. But we now have a very solid AI governance framework. We call this responsible AI. It's a risk-based approach, that closely scrutinizes AI in the consequential decisions when we make these systems, when we evaluate AI systems. Every time I want to ship a feature here at GitHub, an AI-based feature, I have to go through a rigorous process that is very similar, in fact, to other processes like security reviews, privacy reviews, red team exercises. There isn't really any software today, whether it's AI or not AI, that can be shipped without checks and balances in place. Privacy, security, compliance, ultimately trust need to be built into any AI product and into any any piece of your company's process. And it needs to be part of the developer's mindset, of the employee's mindset. And that often means, just starting with a culture change and explaining to employees why compliance, why security is relevant, and why it's important for you as a company. But it also means that there needs to be frameworks and time in the process to test, right? AI-based systems have the behavior that, because they're non-deterministic, at times they are outputting different results than just the day before, even the minute before. And again, if you've played with ChatGPT, you probably have seen that you can ask it the same question multiple times and you get different answers. That's not a design decision that the developer of the AI system made. It's a technical, an underlying technical reason, because you're running inference, for example, for GPT-4 on 24, GPUs. Every inference request is parallelized on 24 GPUs, which each have, multiple cores. And so you have multi-threaded systems, and as those systems calculate lots of numbers, they don't come back at the same moment in time. So the convergence of all these results from all these GPUs is different every time you run this process. So the best way you can do is you can monitor your AI results in the same way that you're monitoring uptime of your production system. So all of a sudden, your engineers no longer just look for 99.999 uptime. They're also looking at accuracy of AI responses. They're looking at all kinds of measures that are coming out of the AI system, and they need to get, need to be on call. They need to be woken up in the middle of the night if the AI system goes south and for some reason no longer gives good answers, high quality answers, or low security answers. At the same time, excuse me, at the same time, I encourage organizations I talk to that AI is a new technology. It comes with risks, and we hear a lot about these risks in the media. But at the same time, we always live with these kind of risks in the industry. AI models today are like the combustion engine 100 years ago, and we are at the early invention of the combustion engine. And there's lots of infrastructure that needs to be built around these combustion engine, gas stations, highways, freeways, parking garages that are yet to be built. And so we are really early in this journey. We are really early in the figuring out how AI is impacting our lives. And we should be really optimistic about this in the same way that we were optimistic about cars when cars become mainstream. And today, I think most of us cannot imagine a life without a car that takes us anywhere, everywhere we want to go. Sorry, I need a water. And so lastly, then the question is, so what does it take for me as a company, to roll out AI? What does it mean for me as a leader, for you as a leader, to anticipate, in this new era? And just as I mentioned, every company becoming a software company, every company is now becoming an AI company in some way, shape, or form. Your digital leaders today will become your AI advisors. And as CEOs, I think it's an imperative that you learn the fundamentals of this technology, especially as it advances so fast, that you can really meld it into the framework of your company. I already mentioned data. Data will play an ever-increasing role. The data layer needs to be unified. It can't be separated into silos of your company. And you as a leader need to encourage your organization to think about it that way, as a holistic approach, adopting AI, unifying data, and training your own AI model. And so what that means is, the people that surround you will constantly have to evaluate this landscape. They will have to help you provide with options of what you can do. They have to be systems thinkers. They have to take these complex problems that we all have to tackle and break them down into small Lego blocks. And along the way of this decomposition, they have to make lots of technical decisions, lots of informed decisions. So they need that systems thinking approach. And that's, also answering the question why software developers and engineers are not going to get anywhere. You still need those people that have these expertise to make all these decisions. You need systems thinkers, you need culture changers that can influence your organization and point out the positive side of this. And at the end of the day, you need people managers because the human side will play an even bigger role in this age of AI, because as they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. That's all I had. I don't know if you have time for questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, Thomas, we do have time for a couple of questions. I'm probably going to speak the questions out when they're in the room so you can hear them, and because we don't have microphones for everyone here. So I'll do that. And, so anyone has any questions? Otherwise, I have one of my own, so I'm going to ask anyway. I know we were supposed to do this more like a fireside chat. That would have been fun. Great. Thank you for that. So while we're waiting on, and folks, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and speak it out. While we wait I think one of the questions, Thomas, that is asked, obviously, as Intellibus, we run, Copilot, and we all use AI for generating functions. One of the questions that is being asked, especially with CIOs and CXOs that we talk to, obviously they want to automate, obviously they want to do it in cheaper, better, faster. How far are we in their products in this space? And if there's something confidential you can't disclose, that's fine. But I think that the more a vision question or readiness question, how far is this journey from function completion to what we call app completion? Because the real democratization would be if I could just go to GPT and have the whole app ready. I mean, we've all tried, you can't do it, but it still requires like a process, like there's a process around it. Like how soon can we go from like, I thought of this idea and boom, there's an app, right? So how far do you think we are from that stage?
Yeah, maybe instead of answering that with how far we are along this journey, I tell you how far we got in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, we had single line completions, sometimes just a few words. And now we have multi-line completions where developers can autocomplete, whole functions, unit tests, multiple, sometimes 20, 30 lines of code with a single tap. And then the next thing they want to write, as soon as they start typing, they get another 30 lines. You may have seen in ChatGPT or in Copilot chat, you can ask questions, build me a little web page to announce my new product, and you get it stubbed out, that whole web page. And then you obviously still have to go in and make modifications to that. Over the next, few years, I think we're going to get to the point where AI can create whole subsystems, maybe a complete file, maybe even modifying multiple files of your existing code base, things like transforming legacy code like COBOL or Java into a more modern programming language like Python. We're going to get there, but along that way, there's two things to consider. One is we all know these models have hallucinations. They're not always correct. And so you need to have an engineer, software developer, and team of experts that are reviewing all this code that are coming out of the model to make sure that what it is building is actually what you were intending to build. The flip side of that is, and why you also need to have the human involved, is that we are under constant attack in the software industry. We are constant denial of service attacks, spy attacks, people trying to intrude systems, or people trying to, take you down to push for ransom, right? And as such, we're really farther away, I think, forever from letting systems just automatically do things in our production world. You always need to have a human as the last approver, and that can't be the same human that submitted the change. It needs to be, the 4I principle, if not more. And AI actually helps us here, especially in regulated industries, to not only support the process, but actually create a full audit trail. A show your work in a math exercise in school, if you will, right? Because now AI, as it's part of every step of the process, can actually show the prompts that we're used to, generate the code, describe the code that was changed, even find security vulnerabilities and submit a fix for this. We call this code scanning autofix. And so AI will actually make that security problem easier and the regulatory environment more auditable. But at the same time, the human will always be in the loop, and I don't see us anytime soon to be in, a self-driving software development world.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that, because there's been a lot of news and we've all seen several companies claiming that. So it's really good to hear the real grounding and reality of it. So thank you for sharing that. The other kind of question that we get asked often from CXOs is, yes, I mean, of course, they'd love to use Copilot. There's the security concern saying, oh, my data, my code is going to go and sit somewhere else, or and a lot of companies think of code as proprietary. And so they're thinking, oh, should I take my code and train my own model, use like the code llama? What are sort of your views and your lens? Obviously, I know you'd have a little bit of bias in favor saying, of course, use GitHub and that. But like, how would you sort of weigh that? And let's say if you're not with GitHub, what would be like your viewpoint? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, we haven't trained our own models, right? We have, partnered with OpenAI to do that for us, training a foundation model. Starting, from scratch with the model architecture and then doing all that training is a long process. that takes multiple months. And then after you have trained that model, you have to go through securing the model and making it responsible, adding the safeguards. And so that, is a costly factor. So training a foundational model, I would only recommend if you're in a very specific field and these language models in itself don't provide a good foundation. Then the next step you can do is fine-tune a model. And you can do that today with the Azure OpenAI API. We are having already announced that we will offer fine-tuned models on GitHub. So you can just, pick your repository and or set of code bases and say, tune me a model on this. And this is really useful when you have, a programming language as an example, or a deviation of the standard input set to more generalize the answer there to get better output, right? Typical examples are that companies like Goldman Sachs have internal programming languages that they are not in the public domain. As such, the model doesn't know about them. And so tuning the model then to speak that language is useful. But the flip side is, again, tuning is still requiring you to run compute on NVIDIA GPUs. And it forks, the foundation model into your own version. It's like tuning your car. And then there's a new car. And now you have the decision, do you want all the goodness of the new car, or do you want to keep your tuned car, right? So that's the trade-off you have to take. And so ultimately, we believe the best approach is to customize the Copilot, the AI system, based on patterns like retrieval augmented generation by pulling data into the inference time, into runtime. So you don't have to, touch the foundation model. You don't have to touch the compute layer. You can do it in the user and the application layer.
That's super helpful. So Cole mentioned we have time for one final question, so we're going to take that. I think the question is around going back a little bit to security, like you mentioned about security fixes. I think the other concern is we all know, and we've seen with GPT, you can kind of, give it an unintended input, and then it can have disastrous consequences, right from the model crashing to all kinds of things. So there's that security concern because, I'm sure you're doing thorough testing, but there's always those outliers. Like someone can, sort of social engineer, maybe that's not the right term, the AI in some sense, and can they put in sort of hidden Trojans in the process, and how do we do like model safeguards, and what can you share, publicly in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, as I already mentioned, within the product, we have all these safeguards built into the product from a responsible AI perspective, from a monitoring perspective. We are making sure that whatever happens, within the part of our stack is constantly monitored from a security, compliance, privacy, and quality perspective. At the same time, especially for software development, what's really interesting is that, if you have been in modern software development for the last 2 decades, we have done a lot of these things to prepare ourselves for the age of AI, right? The overarching term is DevOps. Your developers today don't write code without also writing unit tests and integration tests. They go through what we call the inner loop by building, testing, and debugging code on their local machine. Then they're submitting that code into a repository. That's what GitHub is all about. For code review on the one side, for human code review, which hopefully helps with the social engineering, but also for processes like continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD, running all your test suites, running security scanning, hopefully flagging any kind of alerts that pose a risk to your company. And then you go through your deployment process with staged rollouts into different environments. And so hopefully you don't break all your customers with the initial deploy, and you're only testing with a smaller user base, or even have a feature flag that allows you to only roll out to small percentages. So what I'm saying is, in software development specifically, we're already putting all these processes in place to make sure that when the developer gets a broken suggestion from the model or something that's not exactly perfect, they already know how to handle this. In fact, I claim, most of your developers not using AI today, they're doing the exact same thing. They're going somewhere on the internet, whether it's GitHub or Stack Overflow or Reddit or somewhere else, and they're copy and pasting code from there, or it's maybe the documentation that Apple provides for the latest iPad. And then they're modifying that code in their editor to make it run and make it work and make it pass all the test cases and hopefully pass the code review process. So from that perspective, software development or software developers as part of the workforce are actually ahead of other parts of the workforce in both having the right processes in place and also leveraging AI to its fullest potential.
That's super helpful, and I'm assuming that there is no encryption at the model level itself. The model itself isn't being physically encrypted, because I'm assuming it's just a set of numbers, right?
That's correct. There's obviously encryption and transport, so everything you're sending to model inference to the APIs is encrypted. But during the inference, there is no encryption, given that this is literally converting your words into numbers, and those numbers are then multiplied with billions of matrices. Excuse me.
And that's
until the output. Yeah.
That's a transport, not at rest, right?
At rest, is it encrypted?
So I think the question
There's
is,
no rest, right? The model doesn't store any of your data. Despite the name machine learning, the model does not learn from what you're running at inference. So it's only transient. And then the code in the repository on GitHub, that is encrypted.
Got it. Awesome. Thomas, thank you so much. I know how busy you are, and you're the person of GitHub and all the AI coding in the world. So thank you for making the time. Thank you for being here. Such a pleasure to have you. I'm sure everybody enjoyed your conversation. We have the recording, so it'll be available for folks later to watch. And I'm sure if there's questions, maybe we'll circle back to you offline, over email or something, and try to get the responses back. Thank you once again.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, Paul, for organizing this. Appreciate it.